The design choice of only using black and white for the enemy sprites in battles has always been an interesting one to me. Was it an intentional decision, or was Toby just lazy? Well, if we're being completely honest here, knowing Toby, it was probably a little bit of both. But while it may have started as a shortcut so that he didn't have to color in every single sprite, I'm inclined to believe that somewhere along the line, it did turn into a deliberate stylistic choice that would affect far more than he first planned for. Well, let's just start with how the battles look in general. A lot of it is very unorthodox, but it's all very deliberate. Notice how a ton of it is in black and white. The text, the battle box, the background, and even the monsters in front of you. It's designed to shift your focus away from the monster fighting you and more onto you and your decisions. Notice what is colored on this screen. Besides the background, it's all you. Your soul, your health bar, and your choices are the most standout parts of the screen. You are the focus of the battle, and it makes sense. Undertale is a game primarily about your choices. By making the monsters black and white too, it helps to exemplify their lack of importance in the fight. Okay, I know that sounds really mean, and obviously the monsters you're fighting matter too, but what I'm trying to say is that the role they play is pretty small compared to ours. For the large majority of Undertale battles, we're the ones who dictate the pace of the fight. We're the ones with the power to make friends with them or end their lives, not the other way around. It's fascinating because even the bosses are forced to abide by this no color rule as well. You'd think that Toby would at least use colors for the bosses. I mean, come on, they're major fights, major characters. But he still refuses to add any color because the same principle still applies. Sure, they're a bit tougher, but you're still the one in charge of their fate. You have just as much control over bosses as normal enemies when it comes to who lives and who dies. Whether it be some random encounter or a major boss battle, all the fights in the game are like this. Well, at least they are, until... Okay, come on, for as much as we like to downplay this guy, this moment is pretty sick. But I can also guarantee that it wouldn't be nearly as powerful had Asgore just been completely black and white like all the other battle sprites in the game. By giving him color, it not only just makes him look cooler, but also immediately conveys Asgore's sheer importance and strength. No other enemy before Asgore has even had an ounce of color in their battle sprite. It quickly lets you know that this is not like all the other fights before. This is serious. This time, you're not the only person with color, and it's because for the first time, you don't entirely decide how this battle goes. I mean, he literally destroys your mercy button. But interestingly, only the trident is colored. No other part of Asgore's sprite is. Throughout our journey, whenever Asgore's name is mentioned, it's always in this big, red, menacing text. But the danger that this red conveys isn't Asgore himself, it's his weapon and what it represents. Because Asgore himself is actually quite the softy at heart. Deep down, he'd like nothing more than to just live a peaceful life without conflict. But the trident represents that need for violence and bloodshed that the world has constantly required of him. It's the war that got monsters stuck underground in the first place. It's his promise to set monsters free by any means necessary. And above all, it's the tool that he used to put down 6 others just like you. Pretty cool, huh? Okay, so Toby didn't use color in all the other battles in order to give massive impact and payoff to the final boss. That's really cool. Whether you decide to kill or spare Asgore, it doesn't matter, because out of nowhere, that flower from the very beginning comes back to finish the job and absorbs all 6 human souls, transforming into this abomination. It's shocking, and that's only hammered in with the battle sprite being fully colored. Not only does it serve to make the whole thing look much more grotesque and vivid, but it really conveys just how much overwhelming power Flowey actually has right now. That Asgore guy was pretty strong, and he only had one part of his sprite colored in. And it makes perfect sense. Whereas Asgore had the ability to take away some of your agency in the fight, Flowey's able to take away all of it. He is completely in control here. Your menu is fully ripped away, and when you do get to fight, you basically do negative damage to the guy. In other battles, you can at least decide when to take your turn, but here, Flowey doesn't even grant you that luxury, as you're forced to constantly dodge his attacks while he just plays with you, deliberately making you suffer as much as possible. It's to the point where you can't even win the fight on your own. You need the help of the other souls in order to stand a chance. A minor detail that I've always liked about this is that it establishes some possible lore consistencies too. Another reason why monsters may appear all black and white in battles lore-wise is because their souls are all white. Flowey is the same way until he absorbs the 6 human souls, stealing their power and also their color. But yet, even with 6 times our power, there's still one part of him that doesn't have color: himself. Whenever that monitor shows Flowey, he's still just black and white. Even with the souls, deep down, he's still just as soulless as ever. The Azrael fight works for a lot of the same reasons. It's supposed to be surprising, and when the music finally gets going, you're met with an overwhelming burst of color that fills the whole background to amplify that shock. It's really great at giving that energetic Final Frontier kind of vibe too, and even reminds me of the background in Final Destination from Smash Bros. It's also great because it uses colors in a very visually distinct way from the other 2 fights as well. While they both had their own sprites colored, here it's the background that's colored. Azrael stands out for the opposite reason that Omega Flowey does. Instead of having a colorful sprite against a pitch black background, his battle sprite is monochrome against a colorful background. Even though Azrael is stronger, the color being in the background and not in his sprite directly makes this feel like a much more fair fight than Omega Flowey. Despite basically being up against a god, it doesn't feel impossible to win. It feels like after all you've been through and all you've done to get here, you can somehow find a way to beat the odds just one last time. But I think it's time that we finally addressed a certain skeleton. Alright, you've probably already heard like 50 different people talk about exactly why and how the Sans fight is so great, so I'll try and be quick here to avoid treading the same ground. I mean, come on, this guy's the most popular and iconic character in the game for a reason. But what I want to emphasize here is the most iconic part of his design, his glowing blue and yellow eye. Because without this eye, I feel like the moment where he finally takes the mask off and reveals it wouldn't even be half as special as it is. It's simple, but very effective, and sums up Toby's use of color in general. It conveys power, but also great importance. While Sans himself is incapable of resetting, his fight is so brutal that he's bound to force quite a few deaths out of you whether you like it or not. It's not much and it's far from guaranteed, but he's strong enough to pose a real threat of whittling down your determination and making you quit for good, essentially saving the timeline. It's more than just his power though. This eye also symbolizes everything he's been hiding. Not once in the entire rest of the game does he ever show this special eye. Not in any cutscene, talking sprite, nothing. You're constantly left wondering what's really up with Sans, and right as he drops the act and shows his real power, it's perfectly synchronized with him finally showing off his eye as well. By revealing it here, it's not only paying off that mystery which has been built up for literally the whole game, but also makes the eye itself a representation of that mystery. In short, colors are pretty cool in Undertale, and it shows just how creative you can be with how you present your battles. It's nothing too crazy or impressive visually, in fact, it's quite the opposite. And it isn't even a concept that's never been done before. Loads of other games have their fair share of final bosses which look visually distinct. But Undertale executes the concept in such a unique and interesting way that I can't help but put it in a class of its own when it comes to this type of stuff. Well, it's either that or maybe Toby was actually just too lazy at coloring these sprites.